economy overall. And here maybe it is surprising for many to see the results, because actually when you run the model there, you cannot really identify any negative impacts on GDP for these countries in this period of time. Actually, the impact of these small tax shifts in terms of 1% of GDP actually amounts in some cases to up to 0.5% positive effect on GDP. And this is exactly because these carbon energy taxes are being used to lower these distortionary payroll taxes, which also are a brake on competitiveness. And the importance of this revenue recycling, you can see if you ask the model what happened if we had not used these proceeds to lower some other taxes, then the tendency would be more towards neutral or negative impacts. I don't think these results should be taken too far. I think in any case we can see that here the implications for economic growth are not dramatic in either direction. So it seems to suggest that we can do these tax shifts without some of the dramatic implications which is implied in some of the debate over shifting to more carbon and energy taxation. And we can also, on basis of these figures, argue that there are positive effects on employment. And in this analysis, we also screened different energy-intensive industries to see which were especially affected. And here on the issue of energy-intensive industries, it's very important to understand that energy-intensive industries to different extent depend on trade and exports and are sensitive in a different way. And with some other modeling, this project also suggests which sector is the most sensitive, and it's actually one sector that was discussed also earlier today. The basic metals sector is the one where competitive conditions are most difficult on the world market. They are the most price sensitive sector, so that is where you may want to aim your exemptions and special arrangements. But there are also sectors like non-metallic mineral products, food, beverage and tobacco that mainly supply for local and regional markets and which are less sensitive overall. We can look here to neighboring Germany. Germany didn't have such a carbon energy tax, but they called it something else. They called it an ecological tax reform, but it's very much along the same principles. And actually, when you there see more carefully into the situation for the energy-intensive industries, and there are 4 sectors here, you can see that yes, there was initially a significant tax burden, 2 to 5% out of surplus. But then there was the lowered payroll tax, and there were also energy efficiency improvements. So actually the net burden here with the green column is very small for all these sectors, and actually at a maximum of 2%. So essentially what this tax shifting exercise was implying for these energy intensive industries was a loss of a maximum of 2% of their surplus, which I think is not a big contribution to ask. So now let me turn more to the more forward-looking perspective in my talk for the last 5 minutes. Green taxation, as indicated with these examples, it has become more customary across Europe. You see here for the EU member states, the share of environment taxation as a share of GDP. The highest share is found in my own country, in Denmark. We are at 6% of GDP in environment taxes. You can imagine how much higher payroll taxes would have had to be if we had not this income from environment taxes. But the general average for EU countries is about 2.5%. And you may ask, where is Switzerland in this? Switzerland data is not collected by Eurostat, but I found in an OECD review quite recent data for Switzerland. And Switzerland is, so to say, the lower end of the continuum here, with about 2.1% of GDP raised as environment-related taxes. So it seems that so far you have been quite careful in this area of tax raising. That doesn't mean that you have no taxes. Actually, they're quite interesting and even unique taxes, like the tax on VOC emissions, which is well known also internationally. And there are many other taxes, and there are also energy taxes and a CO2 tax. But nevertheless, I would like to point to some opportunities on basis of European experience for maybe extending further your tax base in the area of environment. Yeah, I forgot to say during this slide actually that we made this exercise already for Ireland. Ireland is also about 2.2–2.3% at the moment for environment taxes. But because of the Irish financial crisis, the European Environment Agency last autumn sent a team of experts to the Irish government to discuss with them the opportunities for environment taxation and to bring international experience into the Irish debate. And we were, by putting together all the different European experiences, we were able to show that Ireland could actually go even higher than Denmark with environment taxes, just by copying what is existing in some other European countries. And in this way, Ireland would be able to cover a great part of its budget deficit. And we were there in Dublin just 4 weeks before the financial crisis really broke out in Ireland. And actually some of these ideas found their way into the final rescue package in Ireland, including an increase of Ireland's CO2 tax, which will be increased now to Swedish levels from the level it had of 15 euros per ton. But also water pricing will be introduced in Ireland. Maybe could improve on resource efficiency. On one hand, we know that water use depends very much on your income, so the richer you are, the more water you will use for different purposes. So it's not surprising that Switzerland, being a very affluent country, also has a very high level of water use per capita as compared to other European countries. Actually, Switzerland is here in the upper corner of the graph according to the figures I have available from our database. But nevertheless, when you compare with neighboring Germany, you can see that actually there's a quite wide variation in how much water might be actually needed. And we are here talking only about water use for households and for small businesses. And apparently, but I know you also have a lot of water here coming down from the mountains and so on. But nevertheless, we also know water is very important for biodiversity, and most countries have regional shortages of water, and in these cases, water taxes will help not only to raise revenues and lower salary taxes, they will also help to actually mitigate some real environmental issues and problems. Done at the European Environment Agency over air pollution costs. I've noted you have a vignette system here for a long time in Switzerland, the LSV. Already the vignette costs are quite high in Switzerland compared with other countries. Still, these calculations we have done here of air pollution costs from heavy good vehicles suggest that when you do the atmospheric modeling carefully, you see that the cost from a heavy goods vehicles, the health costs, are indeed higher here because of the atmospheric conditions in a mountainous country. So indeed, it's environmentally justified that you should have high vignette costs. And actually here for, let's say, regular urban areas and land areas, you should be maybe around 20 to 25 euro cents per kilometer for heavy good vehicles. So this suggests that your current vignette price, which is set to cover both infrastructure and air pollution and a lot of other things, only barely covers the air pollution and doesn't give a contribution to your infrastructure and the other things. And these air pollution costs, these are health costs. And there's very good work also done here in Switzerland by Infras and others on this. But let me just say that it was mentioned in the papers here, also for this meeting, that of course there are problems we don't want to accept, but these health costs are actually about some people losing some life expectancy because of this amount of air pollution. So here's an area where analysis also suggests that more could be done in terms of pricing of some environmental and health problems. The heavy good vehicles, I touch on the transport sector, and the transport sector is the real challenge for many countries that have to meet the Kyoto targets. The underlying reason is that we've actually had 30 years with a constant gasoline price when you consider the other market developments. It's only recently we have seen these increases in energy costs. It seems here that Switzerland has rather low tax on gasoline as compared to Germany and several other European countries. And because of the central position of Germany, it's the way that Switzerland here approaches its gasoline taxation has actually wider implications for all of Europe. Because, for instance, in Denmark, we are not willing to increase our gasoline tax to higher levels than the German level. And Germany seems here to have a problem at its southern border, that there is a lot of tank tourism, which prevents Germany from increasing its gasoline price as much as it might want to do. So in this way, when you calculate the impacts of changes in Switzerland's gasoline price, you also maybe should think about the wider European implications and not only those for your own greenhouse gas emissions accounting. But even if you take only the national perspective, they might also be worth considering for helping to comply with the Kyoto Protocol. And while we have these discussions, there are of course some of the emerging economies who are going very far actually in identifying alternatives to gasoline. So I mention this as I finish here my talk. If we consider a country like Brazil, they are already having 50% ethanol for their personal transport vehicles. They're also developing those vehicles that we may see come to the markets in Europe as we begin with second generation ethanol. And there are also other types of motor transport that they are pioneering. So they are getting, in a way, the technological advances and innovation opportunities that we are missing by running with low taxes in these areas. So let me end this talk by saying that even if we are talking here about small, gradual adjustments of our energy and environment taxes, I would nevertheless argue that in the same way that small and gradual increases in greenhouse gas concentrations are likely to change our global climate, I believe that minor but steady rises in the pricing of carbon, and we can add energy, will slowly accumulate to fundamentally change the use of energy carriers in our economy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Could you give some hints about the interference between market-based approach as the emission trading scheme and CO2 or carbon tax, two systems, if you have combination?
Yeah, but it's a big debate. It's a huge debate, and it's partly very technical. But it's of course now the European Union has an emissions trading system, especially for the big consumers of energy, industry, and power plants. But with the new proposed energy taxation directive, the European Commission has proposed then for the so-called non-ETS sectors, which includes transport and small businesses, also to have a CO2 price. And I think this is the way the international debate is going now, to say, yeah, emissions trading is a good solution for the big sources to identify the cheapest abatement options, but then there need also to be a similar price for the non-ETS sectors, and these prices will then be introduced by national CO2 taxes under the Energy Taxation Directive in the case of EU member states.
Thank you very much. Any other?